Hi guys! Well, Father's Day is right around the corner and of course I had to make something. And my kitchen isn't quite finished yet, so I don't have access to all of my tools, so I just made something real quick and that's pretty simple. Even though it looks like it might be difficult, it's actually quite easy to make. And these little grill cakes are great for Father's Day or even just for a fun barbecue. The items that you'll need for decoration are some sour chewy cubes, some candy fruits, cookie cutters, food dye, skewers, candy melts in the color black, and then different colored fondant as well as cake. So I made a few bits of my cake in advance, like the frosting, the grill, and the cakes themselves. So the first thing I did was bake two 8-inch round chocolate cakes, and my oven is brand new and I've never baked anything in it yet, so it was kind of trial and error at first. I kept checking it just to make sure that it was baking correctly because all ovens bake differently, and of course my cakes ended up a little bit uneven on the top, but it's completely okay if your cakes come out a little uneven. You're going to level them anyway, and then you're going to torte them, cover them with frosting, so it doesn't really matter. So like I said, I don't have all of my kitchen tools because the kitchen is still being worked on. So I had to use a knife to open up my candy melts, and I had to use a whisk to make my cake batter. So it's been a rough day in the kitchen, but I'm working through it, making it happen. So the first thing that I need to do is melt my black candy melts so I can make my grill. So I'm going to put them in a microwave safe bowl, and I'm going to put them in the microwave and keep checking on it every minute or so, stirring it and making sure that it's melting correctly. I couldn't find my wax paper, which would have made this step a lot easier. I had to use aluminum foil for outlining my circle for the grill. I want the grill to be the exact size of my cakes, which are 8-inch cakes. So I measured the cake pan on my aluminum foil and lined it with a pin. Then I flipped it over and I used that circle shape as a template for the grill. Next up, I placed my melted chocolates into a baggie, and then I proceeded to outline my grill shape. Now, of course, melted chocolate can warp a baggie and cause a huge mess, which of course had to happen to me. So I had to get a new baggie and dump all of my chocolate into the new one and proceed from there. So it got a little bit messy. But if you're not having fun and getting messy, what's the point of being in the kitchen, right? So I outlined my grill shape, and then I placed my aluminum foil into the freezer so it could harden. I also let my cakes cool, and then I flipped them out and wrapped them up so they could be placed into the freezer until the next day. So it's now the next day. Notice the change of clothes. And I'm going to unwrap my cakes. I'm going to fill them with black frosting, which basically I just made a vanilla buttercream frosting and dyed it black. And of course, I had to run to the store to buy food dye because I couldn't find mine anywhere. Everything that could go wrong making this cake was definitely going wrong. No scissors, no mixer, no food dye. It was a real pain in the butt, but I worked through. When my cakes were cooled the day before I wrapped them up and put them in the freezer, I torted them. Basically, all that means is that I leveled them and then I cut them in half before I froze them. So when they came out of the freezer, they were already ready to be filled. Now, of course, I couldn't find my cake leveler. Big surprise, I know. So I had to use a knife and just sort of eyeball it. So one piece of cake was not as perfect as the others, but who cares? Again, they're going to be covered with frosting and they're still going to taste great, so it doesn't really matter. Next, I added a little bit of black frosting to the sides of the cake, and I used a smoothing blade just to finish it and make it look real nice. And then I used a paper towel to clean up the edges, and black dye is a real pain in the butt, might I add. Well, actually, you know what? All dye is. It gets everywhere. It gets on the countertops, and sometimes it's hard to remove. It gets on your skin, and it can, be on there for days. If you can remember to wear gloves, I suggest wearing gloves, but I never can seem to remember to put them on first. Once your cake is nice and smooth and it's real pretty looking and you got the edges all cleaned up, go ahead and place it into the freezer until we're ready for it. Now, I made my frosting the day before, but I wanted to thicken it up today with more powdered sugar. And I wanted to add red, orange, and yellow frosting to the top of my cake, standing up so it would kind of look like flames coming out of the grill. So I used 3 different leaf tips to create that effect. But you have to have thick frosting, otherwise the frosting is too limp and it just basically falls right over. But I wanted nice, tall, standing flames coming out of the top of the cake. Next, I cut Oreos in half so they would act as levelers to keep my grill plate off of the flames on the top of my cake. Next, I rolled out some light brown fondant to look like hot dogs. Then I rolled out some darker fondant to look like hamburger patties, and some yellow fondant to look like cheese slices, and some orange for my wording. And my wording is "#1 Dad." Of course, you can put whatever you'd like, but I chose number one dad because it was simple and easy and I could find those cookie cutters. Now I just used some black food coloring on the end of a toothpick to make my hot dogs look like they had a little grill effect. Next, I grabbed my skewers, my wooden skewers, and I cut them in half because I didn't need them quite that long. And then I used my little fruit pieces and candy pieces to make some visually pleasing little kebabs to add to my grill. Once I had everything ready, I got my cake back out and I put little blotches of frosting in the spots where the Oreos were going to be because I wanted them to stick to the cake. After your cake has been in the freezer for a while, the frosting is no longer sticky, so my Oreos would just fall right off. So I placed a little frosting, put my Oreos on there, and then I smeared some of the red, yellow, and orange frosting on the top so it would look like flames in the grill. Next up, I got my grill from the freezer and I placed it on top of my cake, and then I started adding little flames of frosting coming out of the top. So I used 3 different leaf tip sizes with my 3 different colors of frosting, and I just sort of sporadically put it around just to make it look as real as I could. Once I had the top of my grill looking the way I wanted with the flames everywhere, I started adding on my hamburger patties, my hot dogs, and my little kebabs, just sort of arranging it however I wanted it to be. Then I put my little wording of number one dad on the top and added some more flames wherever I felt like it needed extra flames. All right, so that is it. Our cake is all put together. It was pretty simple and easy to do, and you didn't need a lot of fancy tools. Lord knows I didn't have any at my disposal today other than I happened to have my cake decorator bags and I could find a few tips. But other than that, it was really easy. I hope that you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and thanks again for watching. Have a great weekend and happy Father's Day to all the dads out there.